Welcome to the story behind the gear, and in this episode I'm going to talk about the rest of my cymbal journey, how I got to where I'm at today. And in actuality, it's been a continuum. The first part of the journey was 1975 to 1988, and in that short period of time of getting a drum kit, to going through college, to getting married, to being in a band that I thought might have a shot at making it, that part of the journey was my early cymbal buying experiences. The next years I called the Sabian years, from 1988 to 2012. And I call them the Sabian years because that's what I was primarily playing for those years, Sabian cymbals. But one of the things I hope you caught in all the journeys, the first two episodes, was the fact that I'd always flirted with other cymbal brands along the way. And that being said, the purchase of Paiste Roots hi-hats in 1984, my wife bought me for my birthday that year. That was a significant event. Those Paiste Roots I still have today. The first purchase of a 505 Crash in college. So when we started the Sabian years and I stopped really buying Paiste, except for in the middle of the Sabian years, I bought a Paiste Signature 16-inch Signature Thin China. Loved it. Played the heck out of it. Played it till it cracked, to be honest. I was still flirting with other manufacturers. Now, I don't know if I clearly stated this in the last episode, but one of the reasons I went to Sabian back in 1988 was they were about $15 cheaper per inch than Zildjian. Is it per inch, or should I say per cymbal? So if a Zildjian 20-inch ride was $200 at that time, the Sabian equivalent of that line and cymbal, let's say it's a Zildjian A, $200. Back for Sabian AAs, it would have been probably $185, $15 difference. And I was watching prices because I was not a rich man at that time. I'm not a rich man now. But I had a growing family, wife and 3 kids in 1988, and my brother made it easy for me to get into the Sabian world, and I did. So I was very faithful to trying to stay in Sabian land throughout the 90s. But when the 2000s hit and I moved here to South Florida, things were starting to change for me in my career. And it was a big move to South Florida. I moved for a big company. I had a corporate position. And it seemed like I had more money than I used to have. Now my kids were going to college, and that's a whole other part of the story. We never were flush at that point, but it seemed like I could eke out a few bucks here, a few bucks there, and was more likely to find me in a Guitar Center or Resurrection Drums or Sam Ash down here, looking for something and then picking it up during those years. So the 2000s were years I actually bought a lot of different gear. And it's reflected in my cymbal history that I actually started buying some of the lines of cymbals that I would start to go to and start to think I'm turning towards in the 2000s. So had my whole set of Sabians, was buying additional Sabians, things like Ed Thigpen flat rides and AAX crashes and even an HHX Evolution 22-inch ride cymbal I had. But in actuality, by the time we hit 2003, I started looking at other lines of cymbals. And some of the places I ended up on those great Guitar Center buy days, on Memorial Day and Labor Day and 4th of July, was picking up other cymbals for discounts. And in the 2000s, Paiste was running a lot of prototypes. And I bought a few prototypes. I bought a prototype, I believe it might have been a Signature ride cymbal 20-inch prototype. And eventually, I would buy a Dark Energy prototype at Forks Drum Closet in 2006, a Dark Energy Mark I that I have today. This is a prototype. It's marked as a prototype. I picked it up at Forks in 2006. It had a certain vibe to it, and I thought it was cool, so I bought it. Didn't need a bunch of Paistes with it, but again, that's what started to happen. I was at Guitar Center on Memorial Day or Labor Day, I can't remember which, and I picked up this traditional crash. Now, it wasn't beat up. It's an extra thin 16-inch traditional crash, and it had this little dent in it. I picked this up for 70 bucks. At that time, these cymbals were going for 300 bucks. So the traditional line was always going. But traditionals, they do bend because they're made of that Paiste alloy. Eventually, they do crack, and I cracked this bad boy. It still has a kind of a funky sound to it that's usable occasionally. So I started delving into some Paistes, but Zildjians were were things I would look at too. And one day I went into a music store in town called Chafin Music, and I found two cymbals, and one of those was a 22-inch Swish knocker. Now, if you remember from the first episode, I talked about my journey and buying two Pang cymbals and then an 18-inch China cymbal I got out of the high school band room. And then I got a 22-inch Swish that had 6 or 8 rivets in it. I can't remember which. Well, when I walked into Chafin Music, I think it was 2008, a local drummer had passed away, and this Swish knocker had 4 rivets in it. The 4 original rivets are still in it. They're the darker ones. I went back and replaced all the rivets that were missing out of this cymbal to make it a true Swish knocker cymbal. Swish knocker's got 20 rivets in it, and didn't cost me much to do that. You can see I never cleaned it. Kind of got the smudge and dirt on it. But this is the 70s. Definitely not 79, so it's mid-70s. Got the big high bell and the profile and stuff. And yeah, I picked this up for 65 bucks. I thought, cool, it's got a Zildjian now. And I started thinking more and more like, okay, let's try some other cymbals. Not just Sabian. And I started trying. So I started flirting with cymbals in the 2000s. That's when I picked up a set of 13-inch dimension light heavy hi-hats. I picked up an Innovation Crash one Memorial Day at Guitar Center for like another less than 70 bucks. I picked up a big Swish cymbal. Before I got this one, I picked up a traditional prototype, 22-inch, that I sold on eBay in, I think it was probably like 2019. I put 8 rivets in it. It had a burn mark on it. Got it for 99 bucks. So there were these opportunities to get some interesting cymbals at reasonable prices, and I started buying them. And when I did that, I started saying, well, maybe I shouldn't just play Sabian. Maybe I should try some other things. And then one day, my wife, she bought me this cymbal. Trying to find it right now. I know it's here somewhere in the pile. 2011, my wife bought me an Armand Crash. It's an Armand Thin Crash. Beautiful crash cymbal. 18-inch. That was the first time also I remember seeing a beautiful baby ride that eventually I would get one of those in 2019 from my friend Mike Pisano. It kind of matches this cymbal perfectly, by the way. I think the Zildjian Armand line of cymbals is some of the most underrated Zildjians there ever have been. And I find them to be beautiful cymbals. By the way, so does Simon Phillips, who I hear plays only Armand cymbals on his kit, even though they all have the A logo. They do that for marketing purposes, but if you look at his cymbals, it's got the thin lathing of an Armand Crash or an Armand Ride. Beautiful cymbals. So when I said to you that my Sabian journey went to 2012, it's not exactly correct, because in actuality I started flirting with other cymbals before then. But what happened in 2013 is the thing that sparked me or pointed me in the direction of where I would end up going. And that was this cymbal. This is a Paiste 505 20-inch crash that's signed by Danny Gottlieb. I bought it at Maxwell's Drum Shop, and that day I listened to another 20-inch crash, which was a 2002 20-inch crash, and I didn't like it as much as I liked this one that day. This was, of course, a little cheaper because it was a German 505 from the 70s. And I think it was one of the really early in the 70s, or maybe it was 82, I think it is. It starts with a 2, so it's 82. But it had the black label. It did not have the green label. Anyhow, I bought this cymbal, and I had that Dark Energy ride, and I had those 13-inch dimension hi-hats, and I had that, signature crash cymbal, the traditional one, the 16-inch extra thin. And believe it or not, this didn't really match too well with those cymbals. And I thought to myself, wow, I got this 505, I like it. Sounds better with my Sabians. Sounds better with the Zildjians I had. Wasn't really doing it for me with the few Paistes I had. And I thought to myself, maybe I need to think about other Paistes, which is what eventually did happen. Now, another cymbal that happened, this was 2014. The next year I was in Maxwell's Drum Shop around summertime, and I found this cymbal. And this is the famous Carope cymbal. 22-inch Carope, 2360 grams. Didn't realize the gaff tape stayed on it. Last time I put a piece of gaff tape on it, tape it down a little bit. I thought I pulled it off. But the bottom line to this beat out all the artisan rides they had in there. And they had about 40 of them. And I didn't dig any of their artisan rides for Sabian. And I bought this. By the way, this is all over the Daniel McManus worship album I did with that 18-inch Armand crash, by the way, and a Sabian sound control crash, and a set of 14-inch New Beat hi-hats. That's what I played on that album. This is really not a great commercial ride cymbal. It's a great dark, smoky jazz cymbal for sure. It's just not really commercially viable. And I think that's why Carope started making mediums, because they found that they were too thin for the guys that wanted to play more, get more out of it. And I think if you went to the Constantinople line, they were a little heavier, probably in the 2,700 for a 22-inch ride cymbal, probably around 2,700 grams or higher. So they started pushing it up a little bit. But I bought this Carope. I loved it. I played it. But it really wasn't doing it for me. And this is the darkest ride cymbal I've ever owned. I would eventually buy a Zildjian over here. I bought this in 21, believe it or not. I bought an Avidus. I bought this Avidus so I could see if I could make the Zildjian thing work for me. And by the way, it does. 22-inch Avidus. And I realized this 22-inch Avidus is very close to my Paiste 2002 Big Beat. They got a similar timbre and openness to them that I like. So I bought this. I don't play this enough, probably. But when I was playing a lot of church gigs without the cage, I found this cymbal to be... Sorry about that, Mr. Avidus. I found this Avidus cymbal to be... Now let's try it again. I found the Avidus cymbal to be a great low-volume, in-the-room kind of cymbal that worked. So I did purchase this in 2021. So by 2015... I guess at that point in time, 2015, I really started to think about, what am I playing? And what do I want to play? Do I want to play Zildjians or do I want to play Paistes? And I started bringing them both on the bandstand. One week at church I'd play the Zildjians, the next week I'd play the Sabians, the next week I'd play some Paistes I had. And what really got me into the Paiste game, to be honest, was two things happened. First off, I had that 20-inch 505 Crash, and then I bought my first giant beat. And my first giant beat was a 24-inch ride side that I bought at Guitar Center, believe it or not. I paid new pricing for it. They gave me a little bit of a discount because it was already discolored at that point in time. These giant beats go from that green to kind of a brownish. You see the B8 bronze starts to come through, depending on how much you touch it. This one has started that from day one. It's the brownish thing. That's the lacquer coming off. 2943 grams. And I thought, well, this is cool. So I bought this, and then I bought a 18-inch giant beat thin crash, and then I bought a 20-inch multi-crash, which I liked better for a long time than the 505. I've come to like them both probably the same now. And that's probably has a lot to do with the fact that I started buying more Paiste at 2015. And that was right around the time I would start doing YouTube videos. And when I started doing YouTube videos, I really found that I loved the way the giant beats sounded in the studio. And that caused me to go 24-inch, 20, 18-inch. Now I need a set of hi-hats. I twisted my friend Scott Hazen's arm to get my 505s back. He gave me the 505 medium hats back. He twisted my arm once for a Nobel Cooley snare drum, so it came time for me to twist his arm for those 505s. Never looked back on that trade. The 505 mediums came back to me. And then eventually I got myself a set of 15-inch giant beat hi-hats. And I had a whole set of giant beats, and I was using them a lot. And I said, that 24 is huge. I need something else. So I bought the big beat 22-inch ride, and I bought a 16-inch Thin Crash 2002. And I really like the Thin Crash 2002 with the 20-inch 505 and the 505 hats and this big beat ride. And then I thought to myself, what if I get an 18-inch Crash 2002? And I bought an 18-inch Crash. And then after I bought the 18-inch Crash, I thought, what if I get a 22-inch ride? And I found out the 22-inch ride was completely different than the giant beat 24 or the big beat 22. And all of a sudden, I had a sound palette that I felt I can use on any studio recording session and all my YouTube videos. For the most part, you'll see me almost always playing Paiste cymbals on YouTube. Occasionally, I pull out those Zildjians, but those Zildjians for about 5 years when I was playing at this one church, they were out every time I was playing in the church, because if I brought the Paistes to the church, I got into trouble. Got yelled at. And I don't want to get yelled at. So I learned you take the Zildjians, and the Zildjians were mellower for the room. It was a very acoustic gig, and it had to be in the room, and the crope worked. And I had a 19-inch crope and a 22-inch crope, and then I eventually got a set of 14-inch crope hi-hats right before COVID. And then I bought the Avidus ride, and I had the Mike Fazzato beautiful baby, Armon ride, 19-inch, and I had the 18-inch Crash. And all of a sudden, between 2012 and today, I've got a full set of Zildjians with a set of new beat hi-hats that I got from my friend Dan at DMR Drums, part of a trade with him. And I've been off to the races since then. I've picked up other things like some flat rides. I have a flat Paiste ride. I have a flat Zildjian ride now. And those are things that are in flux too, Also, one other thing I want to step into is I had a good friend of mine, Alan Levine, who gave me that flat Paiste ride. But he also gave me some Istanbuls. And I played Istanbul for a while, a 21-inch Mel Lewis ride. I had that. I had his jazz ride, an 18-inch jazz ride. I gave that back to him, and that's how I got the flat ride. I handed that back to him. I gave him a 20-inch Zildjian from the 50s They have a certain name for it, some type of stamp, small stamp or something stamp from the 50s. I gave him that with some rivet holes in it. He loved that cymbal. I gave it to him. So we traded back and forth some of that stuff, and he gave me some things. I helped him sell a kit. But the bottom line of the whole thing is I started to really think differently about cymbals. And now in 2024, I can tell you beyond a shadow of a doubt, I love Paiste cymbals, and I could play Paiste the rest of my life and probably find some Paistes in the darker range, like traditionals, that would work on any gig in most light gigs I have, and I could probably get rid of the cropes. So I am actually thinking about getting rid of the cropes and only keeping a set of A Zildjians, meaning the Avitus, the 14-inch new beats, and the Armand Crash and the Crash Ride of the 19-inch Beautiful Baby. And that's kind of where I'm at, It seems like Paiste is really meeting my needs, and there's not a lot in me that wants anything but Paiste cymbals these days, except for I am going to take that 20-inch flat ride, which is an A flat ride from the 70s, and I think I'm going to have it reworked by Timothy Roberts. That's the goal. I actually made the email to him. All I have to do is box it up and send it to him and let him see what he does with it. And that would be the deciding factor if I keep the cropes or not. Because if it comes back and it sounds more like a with definition flat ride, then I probably won't keep the cropes. But if it sounds more like a thinner, smokier, quieter jazz ride, flat ride thing, because that flat ride's got some bite to it. It's got 3,000 grams for a 20-inch flat ride. So when he takes some of the weight off of it, it's going to open up a little bit because we talked about it. And if I go for that and it opens up to the point where it's darker, the cropes, it may work perfect with the cropes and be the perfect flat ride for that. But it also could become something that's more in the A range, and that would be a whole different thing then for me. My goal for that flat ride for it to be more like a 602 ride, like a high definition, a little bit glassier. Of course, you don't get that with the Zildjian metal, so it's probably going to be very hard to get that kind of a sound out of it. But I do want it to have a little bit of bite, but spread. You can crash on it a little bit, so it sounds cool. So that's the only thing that I've got in the works that I'm really working on right now. But that's my journey. I started flirting with other cymbal companies, even though I went to Sabian in the late 80s. And most of the 90s, it was Sabian, 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 Sabian. By the 2000s, I had a little money. I just wanted to play other things. So what's the message of this series? Well, first off, this series is for those of you that love Ask Earl Anything and love hearing me talk about cymbals and drums. But the other part of this journey is to say that our ears change over time, and what we think we want changes over time. So always keep yourself open to anything. I will tell you this. At the Nashville Drum Show last weekend, and while at the Nashville Drum Show last weekend, I spent some time at the UFIP booth. And they were selling their cymbals $1 an inch. And I can tell you right now, if I could have found a way to get them home, there was a possibility I wanted a 20 classic ride, 20-inch UFIP, 22-inch UFIP classic ride. And there was a crash, an 18-inch crash, and a 19-inch crash, and a set of those hats. And UFIPs are a whole nother thing, which are different than Zildjians or Sabians because they're very bell-like. And my ear really dug the UFIP sound. Now they're different than the Paistes too, but they're that kind of different where I would like to try that, but I didn't. So I'm not changing the UFIP, but I thought about it last week and I was thinking about it a lot. I thought this is some pretty cool stuff. So open your minds up, open your ears up to things other than what you hear, and play what you love. That's what I say. Play what you love. This is what I love. Love my Gretsch drums. I love my fiberglass concert tom kit. I love my Paiste cymbals. And I love the Zildjians I've picked and the Sabians I've picked over the years. And I'm a blessed man to be able to have a set of each. So thank you for enduring my journey today. I hope it was good and you enjoyed it. Thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe, which I'm supposed to say at the beginning, which I always never do. And remember, God loves you. Talk to you soon.